First of all, I would like to thank Patrick Marcelin for inviting me to be here in this fantastic meeting. My talk today is about nutrition, and NAFLD is also a very hot topic, as you can realize during this morning. I'm trying to share with you how macro and micronutrients play a role on NAFLD, the aims of the dietary modification. We have many ways to do. The role of the Mediterranean diet on the top of the diet to manage this type of patient. A very simple concept that I think it could be very helpful in clinical practice is the geometry of the nutrition. And finally, the potential role of the artificial intelligence for personalized nutrition in patients with NAFLD. When we are talking about nutrition, initially we are talking about calories. Calories is very important, but I was very surprised when analyzing these two studies in which patients with overweight receive 1,000 calories every day using different type of fat. And you can see here in patients receiving more energy, around 600 calories using polyunsaturated fatty acid versus 500 using saturated fatty acids, less in the saturated arm, and the percentage of fat increasing 5%. You can see how polyunsaturated fatty acid in a patient receiving an hypercaloric diet reduce the percentage of fat infiltration in the liver using MRI, but in patients with saturated fatty acid, this fat infiltration, this steatosis, increased significantly. In this other study with 38 overweight patients, comparing saturated versus unsaturated versus sample sugar in patients receiving hypercaloric diet, you can see how saturated is the much higher increase on the fat infiltration, on the triglyceride in the liver, much lower in unsaturated, and in the middle using sugar. Therefore, saturated fatty acids is much worse in comparison with the amount of calories we are eating every day. But what is happening with the isocaloric diet? It's quite similar. In the left part, you can see a randomized control trial, 10 weeks in 67 obese people, and PUFA decreased fatty in the liver by 35%, and saturated fatty acids increased by 10%. And also in this, in the right part, 45 patients with diabetes using a high carbohydrate diet, low fat, versus a high fat rich on olive oil, on monounsaturated fatty acid. Monounsaturated fatty acids decrease fats in the liver by 30% versus just 4% using low fat, high carbohydrate. That means fats is very important, and the type of fat could be a relevant driver in the progression of this disease. In this experiment in our lab, using olive oil rich in polyphenols, we demonstrate that when we increase the intake of olive oil in this animal, they increase body weight in less than the high-fat diet, the standard high-fat diet, but increase clearly. And in spite of this increase of body weight, they did not show steatosis. Fibrosis was much lower in comparison with the high-fat diet. That means it's not the key point to grow up the body weight. The key point is how are you growing up the body weight, and we need to modulate exactly what are we eating, because olive oil could be very helpful in improving the metabolism, the inflammation in the adipose tissue, and also, of course, the NAFLD. And the other part of the geometry of nutrition is the sugar, and fructose is the dark side of the sugar. In this elegant study, including 47 overweight patients receiving 4 different extra 1 liter every day extra of Coke, of milk, of Diet Coke, or water, you can see how the energy when you drink 1 liter extra of Coke is just 430 kilocalorie, and if you drink 1 liter of milk, it's 454. That means milk is higher in calories. But what is happening in the liver? In the liver, milk keep the steatosis in the same level, but Coke increase fructose, the soda increase 140% the infiltration of fat in the liver. That means fructose is able to promote de novo lipogenesis, reduce satiety, increase visceral adipose tissue, increase uric acid, that has been related to the progression of NAFLD, as demonstrated by Conrado Fernandez Rodriguez this year in the Spanish Journal of Gastroenterology, and was linked to NAFLD. But not just NAFLD. If you analyze how much fructose are you eating, drinking every day, is higher than 7 servings per week, you can increase by 2.6 the risk of suffering from fibrosis in the liver. But it's just for the industrial fructose. If you analyze a large amount of fructose eating fruit, for example, you can see eating 93.9 grams is in the upper tertile per 1,000 kilocalories every day, you can decrease the risk of NAFLD by 0.68. It's not significant, but it's a clear trend. That means fructose is very harmful, but just industrial fructose, we don't need to keep in mind what is happening with fructose from the fruit. And this is the final data of this fantastic book from Eric Topol, The Deep Medicine. A chapter is The Deep Diet. I invite you to read this book because it's a very fresh reflection about that. And in this analysis, they take into account total mortality and cardiovascular event. Depending on the percentage of the different nutrients in the diet, you can see how is the carbohydrate increasing. When you increase the percentage of carbohydrate, you increase mortality and you increase cardiovascular risk. And it's completely different when you are increasing fat. In spite, even when you are using saturated fat, you are increasing a little. Of course, you use monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fatty acid, you can decrease cardiovascular risk, you can decrease mortality. But the key point is to segregate fat from sugar. We have at least 2 bad elements at this time, fructose and saturated fatty acid. When we try to analyzing what is happening with the micronutrient, we have a very large list of these micronutrients that has been related to NAFLD because the low intake has been related to NAFLD, or when we analyze cellular levels, we detect that low levels of vitamin D, vitamin C are related to NAFLD, and even when we use these studies in animal models, we can link these micronutrient levels with the development of NAFLD, but it's very common that when we move forward to the supplementation of the diet with the different micronutrients, we did not reach a successful result. Even when we use a completely different endpoint, like improving steatosis by ultrasound, or improving HDLT, improving steatosis by in the liver biopsy, or NASH resolution, fibrosis regression, or the prevention of hepatocellular carcinoma. You see here is the same example several times. For vitamin D, it's clear that in the meta-analysis we demonstrate that the low levels of vitamin D, the higher risk of progression of NAFLD. If you analyze the intake of vitamin D, it's also related to the risk of NAFLD progression, but when we analyze what is happening supplementing the diet with vitamin D, we did not find any effect on ALT, AST, or GGT. Vitamin C is also related, and if you have a very high consumption of vitamin C in the upper tertile, that means 91.4 units per 1,000 kilocal, you can see how this very high amount of vitamin C reduces the risk of NAFLD and NASH, but not NASH fibrosis. Vitamin E is a little beyond the nutrition, because has been when a supplement changed the scenario to move to be a drug, has been used to treat this low level that we can find in patients with NAFLD, together with the idea that using this vitamin E, we can improve steatosis and steatohepatitis, but not fibrosis. Of course, using in a clinical trial, we cannot recommend vitamin E, but it has been very controversial, the final result over the last year. Choline is also a nutrient that plays a major role on NAFLD. Perhaps one of the most common used animal model was the choline deficiency. And when you have choline deficiency, you impair phosphatidylcholine as an essential component of the lipoprotein and reduce the secretion of VLDL. That means we are storing triglyceride. Depending on the amount using the fourth frequency questionnaire, the amount of choline you are eating, you can see here in these three different groups, in men older than 14 years, premenopausal or postmenopausal women, and the low choline intake means the higher risk of fibrosis progression in postmenopausal women by 3.3 times, 2.5 in premenopausal, close to the significant, but without clear effect on males. That means that the decrease of choline intake has been associated with NASH, it's true, but is the plasma levels of choline could be a biomarker of this risk of if this concentration, this low concentration promotes NAFLD progression, or if we can supplement using choline, keep out of our knowledge at this time. So a few studies in children demonstrate that choline supplementation could improve the biochemical liver profile, but I think we are far to have enough results. It's clear that we are using nutrition mainly to modulate the metabolism, the liver function, and of course the body weight. The majority of the diet could be focused on body weight. We know that in patients with NASH, demonstrated by liver biopsy, using a hypocaloric diet during 1 year, we can promote NASH resolution and fibrosis regression at least one stage. And when we surpass the cutoff of 10%, we can have a very, very important success. The main problem, as you know, is just 10% of the population reach this 10% weight loss. But when we analyze deeply in this study, we can see how losing 10%, you can be protected of worsened fibrosis, but in patients with that regress fibrosis, a very important number of patients could not reach this 10% body weight. That means that other factors beyond body weight loss could be influencing, mainly, from my point of view, micronutrients and physical activity. Exercise could explain, or at least in part, all this data. When we analyze what are we doing in our daily practice, not just in the hospital, at home, Mazen Nuruddin published in Hepatology last year this very, very important paper analyzing by questionnaire the diet in close to 3,000 people with a very diverse ethnic cohort, and using this food frequency questionnaire. And you can see the diet with high cholesterol was associated with NAFLD and cirrhosis. At this time, we are not analyzing steatosis or steatopathitis versus non-NAFLD. In this case, we are analyzing patients with NAFLD with and without cirrhosis. How can we play a role in advanced fibrosis? And cholesterol, also the total red meat was increased in patients with cirrhosis, and the red unprocessed meat. Poultry was increased in patients without cirrhosis, and also fever. That means we can classify in the diet some food that could be recommended in patients with NAFLD. But putting together all the macronutrients, and the group of food, we need to move to a dietary pattern. And at this time, the Mediterranean diet seems to be the best, on the top, the number one. Mediterranean diet, as you can see, is contain fat, mainly monounsaturated fatty acid, olive oil, carbohydrate, nut is very important, and fish and meat. It's not necessary to have a very strict restriction. And sometimes when you compare, for example, with low-fat diet, you can see how Mediterranean diet decreased fat infiltration by 40% versus 18% in the group receiving low-fat diet. The Mediterranean diet could improve lipid metabolism, could improve inflammation in the liver, but also in the adipose tissue, and could improve insulin sensitivity, peripheral, and also in the liver. This is a paper published last December, a couple of weeks ago, trying to analyze what is the comparison of the different dietary approach on NAFLD. This is systematic review. At the end of the day, they include just 6 randomized control trials, including 317 patients. It's a very low number of patients. It's not very robust in the clinical, in the quality of this paper, but they analyze how diet modify metabolism, the liver function, and how can promote weight loss. And taking all the data together, they demonstrate that the Mediterranean diet decreased body weight in 3 out of 5 arms receiving Mediterranean diet, improved steatosis in these 3 out of 5, in 2 to 4 improved HOMA, and triglyceride in 2 out of 5. Low-fat diet promote weight loss in just 1 out of 2, and just improve hepatic steatosis in just 1. Intermittent fasting, that is a very controversial topic and a very hot topic in the last month, because after this review in New England Journal of Medicine showed a similar result in comparison with low-fat diet, and the low carbohydrate did not promote weight loss and just improve in one group. All this data could allow us to support the idea that at this time, combining all the different food in these different meals, allocate Mediterranean diet as the first or the more recommendable diet in this setting. Of course, perhaps Mediterranean diet is just the consequence, the spontaneous of the culture, the habit, of the knowledge of our mothers and grandmothers, that we need to combine in the perfect balance all the nutrients. And this is the idea, the geometry of nutrition. We need to put together foods, nutrients, dietary patterns, and meals. And if we remove a carbohydrate, we need to increase fat. And if you say, no, a low carbohydrate diet, yeah, but a low carbohydrate diet means a high fat diet. This is the main reason by which when you use a gluten-free diet in a patient without celiac disease, it could be at risk of developing cardiovascular event. We need to keep in mind when designing this diet that this geometry is constant in all the decision making in the selection of this diet. And finally, just summarizing the fantastic talk of Massimo Pinzani this morning, we have taken care of a systemic disease. It's a very dynamic. A patient could suffer from steatohepatitis moving to fibrosis, but could regress, could move directly from NASH fibrosis without cirrhosis to liver cancer. And this dynamic could be very difficult to address when analyzing how diet impacts on this entity. But also it's a very heterogeneous disease influenced by body weight. It's completely different. A diabetic patient, a linked NASH, and extremely obese patient, the genetic, the microbiome, giving us many phenotypes that we need to address altogether in this type of analysis. And finally, it's a systemic disease with a multi-organ impact on the pancreas, on the kidney, on the adipose tissue, on the brain, and mainly modulated by 2 main axes: the gut-liver axis by the microbiome, the vascular barrier, and the ammonia NASH, and the metabolic liver axis by the lipid and the insulin-resistant pathway. Putting together all this idea with the reality of the dietary pattern in which we have many micronutrient, macronutrient food, different dietary patterns, focusing on completely different therapeutic target from lipogenesis de novo, metabolic stress, apoptosis, to fibrosis, and with all the different therapeutic targets that we are developing, we have a very dynamic a goal to demonstrate which is the best. And at this time, I think we need to put together all this data that we have from pathophysiology, from how we can interpret a diet, and how microbiome, genetic, pathophysiological parameter, anthropometric, lifestyle, environment, nutrient, food, meals, and diet, we need to analyze using artificial intelligence. We need to keep in mind that when we are analyzing any micronutrient, any therapeutic target, any endpoint, we need to put all together, because taking one by one doesn't matter. That did not make sense. This is the personalized medicine that we need to develop to have the perfect diet for every patient with NAFLD, as support Eric Topol in this book. Just finalizing my take-home message, the dietary modifications have been shown to be effective in NAFLD. Modification in the composition of specific macro and micronutrient in the diet are not a central point. The Western diet is dangerous, and the Mediterranean diet could improve NAFLD. The nutritional geometry can be an excellent tool to study the relationship between the various aspects of the diet and NAFLD, and the use of algorithms developed by artificial intelligence for personalized nutritional counseling will be useful to prevent NAFLD in our patients. Thank you very much for your attention.